Hi, I'm Brianna Motzkis from the Fabric Patch, and today we're going to do a twofer. We're going to do the self-binding border. So the self-binding border is super easy to achieve. You can achieve it with a regular quilt top that you've taken to the quilters and you now want to bind and finish up for your little somebody or for yourself, or you can do it as a receiving blanket for a new little bundle of joy. So you will need 2 squares. These squares can be any size you want. They just need to have a small inside square and a larger outside square. So I'm going to start with about a 34-inch inside square and a 45-inch backing, and I'm going to create that to be my self-binding border. So I'm going to cut my squares. I'm going to cut a 34-inch square out of my yard of fabric and a 45-inch square out of my 1.25 yards of backing. You'll also need a piece of batting that is the same size as your smaller square. My batting is also going to be 34 inches. This can be fusible batting. It can be scrap batting from other projects. It can be a cotton batting. You can do it with no batting. It is entirely up to you. Today I'm going to use fusible batting so I can stick it down. If you have scrap batting in your stash that you want to use, you can use 505 spray. It is a temporary adhesive that you can spray the back of your 34-inch square, spray the wrong side, and then stick it down to your batting, and then spray the backing and fuse it down to the back wrong side of your backing fabric. We cannot sell you this because we cannot ship it to you because it is aerosol, but go to any of your local quilt stores or craft stores and they will have a temporary spray. We sell 505, but there are many other brands of a temporary adhesive spray that you can use. Just make sure it is fabric safe. All right, let's get cutting. Okay, and this is how I make my square. So I'm gonna start, I started with a yard of fusible fleece batting. I cut my 34 inches, knowing that I know this guy is 34 inches. And all I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take one corner and go all the way up to the other side to create this nice little triangle. Because I know that from this corner to this corner is exactly 34 inches. I just cut it. This will allow me to get it square if I'm maybe not confident cutter. What I can do is I'll see right here, I'm going to fold this up to point and I'm going to cut right along this edge. Then we have our perfect 34-inch square. The other thing about my inside fabric, my main fabric, is it has a border on it. And I didn't necessarily want the border. So I'm gonna chop off one of my borders. I'm gonna do the same thing. I'm gonna take one corner and go all the way over, knowing that I want to chop off this checkered border. I'm just going to line up right at that corner. Get a nice little diagonal on there. And then since I already have a nice diagonal here, I also need to cut off this little bit to create a perfect square. For my backing piece, I'm going to cut my selvage off first and then make my square. We have our squares cut. We have the top of our quilt and the batting cut to the same size square. In my demo, we've got 34 inches for these two. And then your backing is larger. This is about a 42.5 inch square because I just used what I had after I cut off the selvage. You'll find in quilting again that our width of fabric varies from about 41 to 44. In my case, I'm at 42.5, which is perfect. It's larger than my 34. That will give me about 3.5 inches all the way around my 34 inch square to create my self-binding border. So let's take a look at this one. So this one we have about a 4 inch border. So that means we started with 8 extra inches so that we can then fold over our backing to fold it in half to create a 4 inch border. So just keep in mind when you're deciding of how big you want your self-binding border, just double it. So if you're wanting 3 inches, make sure you have 6 extra inches of border all the way around so that when we fold it over to cover our raw edges of our quilt and stitch that down, we have now cut that in half. So just make sure, double it, whatever that means. Or for our case, I just knew what I wanted. I needed a 36 inch square and a 45 inch square. You can decide that however you want. Depending on how much bigger your back is how big or how small your self-binding border is going to be. All right, so let's make our sandwich. So what I'm gonna do is I'm going to, since I'm using fusible fleece batting, I'm going to fuse the rough side. The rough side of my batting is the glue side to the wrong side of my top fabric. Okay, so I have it all fused together. I'm taking a minute to do some of my spot pressing. I didn't press it before I started ironing on my batting just because, I don't know, it wasn't super wrinkly, but there are some spots in here that I don't necessarily want to get bunched or puckered when I'm sewing on my binding border. So now that that is done, now I'm going to take, so the other side of the fusible fleece is not fusible. It is just good old polyester batting. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to lay out my back right sides down. And I know from measuring, so a quick way to measure if math is not your strong suit, and I have to tell you, math is not for me. It is not my thing. I can do very basic math, and I do have kind of this internal calculator that I get made fun of, but it's really not my thing. But if you need to know how much back you need for a quilt, I can rattle that off. But if it's, you know, subtract 42.5 from 34, I no. I can't tell you that. But what I can do is fold my backing in half, fold my quilt top in half, lay them on top of each other, folder on my left, measuring over. I can tell you right now that I've got 3.5 inches difference right here. So that will tell me where I need to center my quilt top without having to do a whole lot of fussiness. I will take my quilt top, open him up, and I'm just gonna real quick take my mat, or excuse me, my ruler, and I'm just gonna lay it so that 1, 2, 3.5 inches is right here. I'm gonna take this bad boy and make sure he's butted up right against it. You can take a friction pen and you can even draw yourself a line. Again, the friction pen is going to go away with heat, so make sure you have pressed what you want pressed. Or again, at the end of your project when it's all done, it's going to wash completely out. I'm gonna also do that same thing to both sides, because again, I wanna make sure my top is centered in my backing so that my quilt looks square. I don't have, 2 inches of border over here and just like a 1/2 inch over here. I do want it centered. I'm gonna do it to the same thing to the side, 1, 2, 3.5. And I'm just gonna kind of draw a line. Now you can do this on the floor, or if you have a really big quilting space, you can do this whole thing all the way around it if you want to. I'm just gonna do enough to get me started. And I'm gonna do the next side. Again, 1, 2, 3.5. And draw my line. And now that I have my really registration marks, I can take my quilt top and put it right, line up this line over here, line up my line up here, and also on the other side. And then I will be square all the way down. And I'm just gonna take my adhesive spray. Now, not all adhesive sprays are made the same. 505 is not super stinky. I would say do it in a more ventilated room, maybe crack a window. And it does have a pretty well designed spray. It's not gonna like go everywhere. But you could do it outside if you wanted to. It's not, again, super stinky. It does a nice little layer of glue. That's really nice. The glue is only, again, temporary, so it's only gonna last a few hours. So I wouldn't say, get all the sanders together, go to bed, come back at 11 o'clock on your lunch break, and then do it. It's probably not gonna be stuck together. You definitely wanna do it in time. Do this and then stitch it down. So I'm just gonna keep doing that a little bit at a time. I'm gonna roll this up, do the next section. And again, because it is temporary, I only do a few inches at a time. I'm doing about 12 at a time. And I'm just doing a nice smooth from top to bottom. Keeping in mind, I still can see my registration lines all the way down. You don't have to get super heavy with the spray, just enough, again, to keep her tacked down. All right, and you'll notice down here, I ended up with a little extra batting hanging. I'm just gonna cut that off. It is not going to hurt anything. It's not gonna, I'm just gonna get it out of my way. What is most important to me is that when I bring up over my binding, I want to make sure that the raw edges of my quilt are encased. So now comes the quilting part. Putting on our binding. Okay, so now since we have our top all set, now we're gonna start doing our binding border. So I'm gonna flip my quilt so as if I'm doing it in front of you so you can see what we're gonna do. We're gonna create what I call a goalpost. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna take one side and we're going to overlap our quilt about 1/4 inch. On this side, you can go ahead and press this if you want. I know Mom prefers to do this pressing all the way around her quilt. For me, I don't want to do that at a time that I probably don't have. And then what I'm going to do is take the other side, keep this fold, and bring the other side over, overlapping about 1/4 inch over the top of your quilt top. And then I'm just going to do kind of a nice finger press over here. And then we're going to create a goalpost. We're going to cut this. So we're going to take our ruler, we're going to find our 1/4 inch mark on our ruler. We're going to put that right at where these two pieces intersect. So we're going to put that 1/4 inch line right there. So we're going to put that here. And we want to make sure that we're straight. So remember, our ruler has that 45-degree line on it. We're going to put that 45-degree line right on the edge of one of our sides. It can be this side or this side, whatever you, if you're left-handed or right-handed, it might be different. And then make sure that our 1/4 inch mark is right at that point. And then what we're going to do, let me get there, here we go. We're going to cut it. We're going to take our rotary cutter, cut that bad boy off. This cute little house is waste. Then what you're left with is a goalpost. And we are going to sew this bad boy together. What we're going to do is we're going to take this right sides together. And we're going to go to the sewing machine and we are going to sew. You can start from either side, it doesn't matter. I like to start from the point. We're going to sew 1/4 inch down. We're going to stop here. We're going to pivot. So off the edge here. I like to do a little back tack right there because this is going to be actually the corner of our quilt. And then we'll be right back. Okay, so we've sewn our goalpost. Again, started either side, doesn't matter. Come here, pivot, and go over. A quick way, if you have a hard time guessing how far 1/4 inch is, take your friction marker and your ruler and just put your ruler, let me see if I can show you guys this real fast. Put your ruler down this way so we know where your 1/4 inch is, and draw kind of your line. So there's our 1/4 inch mark. We're just going to draw a line. Same thing from this side. We're going to take our 1/4 inch, draw a line this way, and then right there at the center of that bullseye is where you're going to stop with your needle down and pivot to go the other direction. Because it is important to have a nice tight corner right there. So what you're going to do is you're going to take your thread snips and you're going to cut diagonally into your stitch without cutting through your stitch so that we can get our seam to lay flat. So we've just done from here. We've snipped right there so it opens up. Don't snip through that stitch, otherwise you'll have to re-stitch that. It is important not to cut that thread. And then what's going to happen is we're going to fold it back over and it's going to want to just tuck itself right under. Let me see if I can show that to you better. So we started here. We're just going to roll, get that point out, and it'll fold right under. And there you have a self-mitering. Oop, my fuse came undone just a little bit right there. And then you have that little goal post allows you to have a beautiful mitered corner. And then you have this really pretty blue border while you're stitching your binding down. And there you have it. And you can do a your little goalpost cutting. You can do it all at one time, so you can sew all your 4 goalposts at the same time, or you can do it one at a time. It's completely up to you. And there you go. And then now what we have left to do is we're going to stitch this down. There's a couple ways you can stitch it down. You can, like on this cute one I did, you can do a kind of a cute stitch. This is a little, you can't really tell. It looks like a blind hem stitch. So when you're, let's see if I can draw it for you because I don't think you can see it. But what I'm doing is it's stitching in the ditch and then jumping a stitch. Coming back, stitching in the ditch, jumping a stitch. But you can do any of those decorative stitches. Any decorative stitch that you have on your sewing machine, you can use to stitch down that binding. You can do something cute, something with elephant. Just make sure you hit the whole piece. Make sure you're not just stuck up here. Make sure you're really going over your binding border piece and into your quilt so that you're completely stuck in there. If you go too far into here, you run the risk of maybe not catching your entire quilt top. And if you go too far into your quilt top, you run the risk of not catching that binding at all. The other thing you can do on this one is I just rolled it over. It's a raw edge because it's minky, so it's not going to fray. And I just straight stitched all the way down so that you don't have to see it. And I just rolled, again, my backing to create my border binding. Okay, so if you're going to do a real quilt, if you're going to get your quilt quilted, you're going to take it to your quilter, get it quilted, make sure your quilter knows that you're planning on wrapping your backing into create your binding border. They will make sure that your quilt is as centered as they can make it in your backing. They just need to be aware before they quilt it for you. Otherwise, like for me, I try to not waste so much here, so you might have a bigger piece at the bottom to create maybe a pillowcase or something else. So I try to be minimal waste up here. But if you're wanting to create your binding border, you need a pretty big piece of material up here. So if you are wanting to do your binding border, again, you could do it the same way, however it's going to roll over and it's going to cover up some of your little cutie patooties right here. So this is how I did it. It's the same way I did this guy. Is what I did is I have to decide how big is my binding border going to be. I might decide I want to do a 4-inch border, which means I'm going to have to double that and trim 8 inches. I'm again going to take my rotary cutter and my ruler, measure over 8 inches from the edge of my quilt, and trim. The other thing I like to do that's a tad bit different than doing your smaller quilt is I like to leave some batting. So if I'm going to do a large binding border, I'm going to, instead of cutting my batting right on the edge of my quilt, I'm going to measure over half that distance. I'm going to measure over 4 inches and trim my batting. So again, I'm going to take my ruler, I'm going to take my friction pen, I'm going to draw my line on my batting all the way around. I'm going to draw 4 inches from my quilt. I am then going to cut with my scissors off the batting, leaving my 4-inch piece. Then measure over 4 inches more, cut my backing. So I now have 8 inches of backing, 4 inches of batting, and my perfectly cute quilted quilt. I am then going to take my, I'm just going to fold this over. I'm going to create this little fold thing. I don't want to trim this for Deb in case this is not what she's going to do. Let me take this little guy. Okay, our pink, this is batting. This is some beautiful pink batting. So we're then going to take the edge of, so we've measured over, we've trimmed our batting, we've measured over another, doubled that measurement, and now we have our perfect, ready to make our binding border to finish this quilt so we can give it away, snuggle it, however we decide. So we've got our batting perfectly trimmed. Again, we're using scissors, so if it's a little giant, don't get stuck. And I would say I would use my scissors. I don't think I would trust myself to fold the backing under and use a rotary cutter and a ruler. I feel like that's a whole lot of risk because you've done all of that work and the last 4 inches you've cut into your batting, your backing, and game over. I've done that too many times to tell that scissors are the safest way. So if we want our 4-inch binding border to end right at the edge of our quilt so we don't lose any of our panel piece, we're going to take our edge of our backing, we're going to bring it to the edge of our batting. We're going to pretend that the batting is the edge of our quilt. We're going to do that all the way over, all the way on the other side, do the same goalpost technique, same difference. Sew that goalpost together, and then as it folds into itself, it's then going to fold and it's going to sit perfectly right on the edge of your quilt without overlapping too far where you lose your cute little guys. And then you're going to have this pretty little layer of batting in there between your 2 layers of minky or your flannel that's going to create that really nice texture where it's just not 2 floppy pieces of batting. There's going to be actually something stable in the middle there. So that is how I would make a large binding border off of a quilt, is I would extend my batting and create my goalposts off of my batting and then continue before. The other thing, let me show you, is Marie Osmond did a book a couple years ago. I think this book is out of print. She has really good gift ideas, really cute things, but she does a mitering border binding technique also. It's different from mine, but if you feel like you really need instructions and you need more visuals, maybe you learn better with words, Marie Osmond's book is a really good idea. There's also really cute projects in this book. It's already spiral bound for you. So if you need maybe a different way, if you feel like that way does not work for you, check out Marie Osmond's book. It is also gives you really good illustrations and words to do the same kind of technique in a different method. Okay, so I've done all 4 of my goalposts, and I find, use your purple thing. I don't have one here to show you, but use your purple thing to poke out your corners, have a nice crisp point right there. And I find that after I fold over all 4 of my points, I can easily kind of fluff these guys so they lay really nice. I then take it to an iron and give it a nice little press. I also use my glue stick. Again, I like my Quilter Select glue stick, and I just kind of glue it into place. Again, it comes out fluorescent green so I can see where I've been, and I just glue it into place. Get that little extra. As I'm sewing, I can just be going to town and not have to worry about it slipping or doing something naughty. So I give it a little bit of glue. You can also use Roxanne's Glue Based It. It's a liquid form glue. Again, they all dry clear, completely washable. It's really good. The other thing you can use is Wonder Clips have those cute little ones. Have these cute little ones. They also have these jumbo guys. They're pretty cool. They look the same as the little ones, just bigger. They also have, what's really cool on the back is they have measurements where it's 1/4, 1/2, 3/4, and 1 inch in case you're doing something that's very specific. Maybe you're hand stitching, binding down, and you want to make sure you have a 1/2 inch thick binding because you want to do show quality. You're going to win this show and your binding has to be on point. These measurements are super nice. In my case, I don't care about the measurements. I just care that they are long. They will hold my binding down in place. And I just have the one, I forgot my package at home, but clip every couple of inches. Just clip them down. You can do both, do the glue and the clips just to keep everything super snug. Do as many as you want at a time. Again, do a couple inches apart. You don't have to be like pinned super close. You can also use pokey pins if you prefer to, but I really like the jumbo Wonder Clips for these. And then we're just gonna go ahead. I think I'm gonna use just some boring black thread, but you could use lime green or red, any color you wanted to. I'm also just gonna do a straight stitch. You could do the serpentine stitch, which is gonna be kind of wavy. You could do some cool little cute little cars if you wanted to. You can do as intricate as you want or as simple as you want. So I'm gonna go and I'm gonna just do a straight stitch all the way across, and then I'll show you when it's all done. All right, so here it is, all done. So again, all I did was a basic straight stitch to stitch down that folded edge there. And that's all it is on the back. Of course, it's not quilted. It's just a cute back with a nice little seam on the edge. And then it can be anything. It can be a floor mat. You can gift it with a cute little Hot Wheel or two. And it can be a play mat for the house. It can be a receiving blanket. It can be a blanket that then we can take out at the cousin's house to play with. So something super fun. There's kits available in this colorway. Again, all you need is a yard of your center and a yard and a quarter of your backing to make a 42-inch square fun self-binding border quilt. I hope you enjoyed the self-binding border tutorial. It's very fun. It's very easy to do. My favorite technique is to do it with Minky on the back. I think it's great. It adds a really cool dimension to it, and it gives that little extra snuggle for that little person, or even for yourself. If you want that little extra fun piece at the edge of your quilt, that's a little more than just a 1/2 inch. So hope you enjoyed this, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you for watching our video. We invite you to leave a comment, hit the like button, or better yet, subscribe to our channel so you never miss an episode. You can also visit our Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, or Pinterest pages, or find all of those things and our online store at fabricpatch.net.